In that abandoned house, where the shadows of groaning walls sounded like prayers of the damned, I sat alone, immersed in the world of cinematographic nightmares. In these walls steeped in ominous atmosphere, time dragged slowly, as if each second was permeated with unknown horrors, ready to descend upon an unprepared soul at any moment. Thus began my story, sitting in the darkness, watching a movie that seemed to be but a pale reflection of what was happening behind my closed doors. The first ring of the doorbell sounded like a harbinger of doom, but I, succumbing to my own laziness and irritation, approached it only to find emptiness at the threshold. Returning to my armchair, I felt my soul filled with an inexplicable unease, but the force of habit and the desire to continue watching the movie prevailed. However, the doorbell continued to ring, as if summoning me to something unknown. Throughout the night, they tormented my mind, penetrating through the walls of my small sanctuary, as if creeping up on it from the darkness. I began to tremble inwardly with each new knock, but could not muster the courage to address the issue. No, my bravery was but a pale shadow in this atmosphere of fear. On the next night, the ringing did not cease, but became even more insistent. My neighbors, those who lived in this dark neighborhood, began to show concern, and one of them, succumbing to the temptation to unravel the mystery, decided to go out and see who was behind these strange visits. My fear reached its peak when I heard his scream, breaking through the night's silence, as he opened the door. The next morning he was gone. He disappeared as if swallowed by the dark abyss of this house. I realized that this house concealed something much darker than I could imagine. I felt its black walls absorbing not only light but also the souls of those who dared to leave their shelters in search of truth. And so the long nights continued, where every knock on the door seemed to herald a new disaster. I could no longer distinguish reality from nightmare, and every time I heard a knock, my heart skipped a beat, anticipating the approach of something sinister. One day, when I heard the knock again, I stepped outside, tense and ready for any trial. And there, in the darkness, I saw her. A woman, pale and grim, as if unleashed by demons themselves, stood before me. Her eyes gleamed with fury, and her hair, like black snakes, mysteriously swayed in the night breeze. I realized that in this house was something much more sinister than just knocks on the door. I realized that I was facing something that defied the ordinary laws of life and death. That's when I realized that we were being pursued by a vengeful ghost, possessed of inexplicable power and a thirst for vengeance. And I had only one thing left: to accept my fate and try to unravel the mystery of this place before it swallowed me, like all the others who dared to enter its dark embrace. It was a gloomy evening when I stumbled upon a surprisingly affordable rental listing online. The description praised spacious rooms, modern amenities, and a great location. Despite the landlord's grim demeanor during our brief interaction, I dismissed any sense of unease as mere paranoia. After all, encountering eccentric characters was not uncommon in this day and age, especially in the realm of online transactions, where personal encounters were often limited to digital communication. Handing over the month's rent in advance, I couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort as the landlord's penetrating gaze bore into mine. There was something strange about him, something lurking beneath the surface that I couldn't quite pinpoint. However, I attributed it to nerves and proceeded to settle into my new living space. The first few days in the new apartment passed uneventfully. I spent my time unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and getting acquainted with the layout of the building. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary, and I began to wonder if I had exaggerated my concerns about the landlord's peculiar behavior. But as the days turned into weeks, a sense of unease began to creep over me once again. It started with small things: a creaking floorboard here, a flickering light there, nothing that couldn't be attributed to an old building settling into its foundation. But soon, the disturbances became more frequent and more pronounced, disrupting my peace of mind and leaving me on edge. And then, one night, things took an unexpected turn. I was awakened by a noise in the hallway. My heart pounded and fear paralyzed me. Despite every fiber of my being urging me to investigate, terror held me in place, my breath shallow and uneven. Morning brought signs of intrusion throughout the apartment. Drawers had been rifled through, personal belongings were scattered haphazardly, and a sense of violation hung heavy in the air. I tried to convince myself it was just a vivid nightmare, but deep down, I knew something sinister lurked within those walls. As the days passed, the disturbances only grew worse. Strange noises echoed through the halls at all hours of the night, shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and a pervasive sense of dread settled over me like a suffocating blanket. I tried to rationalize the occurrences, attributing them to stress or lack of sleep, but the truth was undeniable. Something was terribly wrong in that apartment, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then, one night, as I lay awake in bed, I heard it again, the soft whispering, the shuffling footsteps, the sound of something moving in the darkness. But this time, it was coming from inside the room, from under the bed. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, as I watched in horror as a pair of glowing eyes appeared from the darkness under the bed, fixated on me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. I wanted to scream, to run, to escape the terror that had taken hold of me, but I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. In the quiet town, nestled among the rolling hills and lush forests, stood a house like any other on the surface, but beneath its quaint exterior lay a darkness that defied comprehension. My family and I, seeking a fresh start, moved into this house with hope in our hearts and dreams of a brighter future. The neighborhood welcomed us with open arms, and for a time it seemed as though our troubles were behind us. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, strange occurrences began to plague our once peaceful abode. It began with whispers, a soft, barely audible murmur that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. At first, we dismissed it as nothing more than the creaks and groans of an old house settling into its foundations. But as the whispers grew louder, taking on a sinister edge, we could no longer ignore the unsettling feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then came the dreams, vivid, haunting nightmares that left us drenched in sweat and gasping for air. Dreams of shadowy figures lurking in the corners of our rooms, of eyes gleaming in the darkness, watching, waiting. We tried to shake off the unease that gripped us upon waking, but it clung to us like a shroud, suffocating us with its presence. And then, one fateful night, our youngest son came to us in tears, his small frame trembling with fear. He spoke of a presence in his room, a presence that lurked beneath his bed, its eyes glowing with malice. We reassured him that it was just his imagination running wild, but deep down, we knew that there was truth in his words. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the evening weighing heavily on my mind, I heard a faint scratching coming from beneath the floorboards. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as the sound grew louder, more insistent. With a sense of dread gnawing at my insides, I forced myself to investigate, steeling my nerves against what I might find. What I discovered beneath that bed would haunt me for the rest of my days. There she was, a specter of pure terror, her pale, twisted form contorted in agony as she clawed at the ground, desperate to break free from her prison of darkness. Her eyes, two pools of infinite blackness, bored into mine with a malevolence that chilled me to the bone, sending shivers racing down my spine. I recoiled in horror, the stench of decay filling my nostrils as I stumbled backwards, my mind reeling with disbelief. How could such a creature exist in our world, in our own home? And more importantly, what did it want from us? As if in answer to my unspoken question, the specter let out a blood-curdling scream, a sound so primal, so filled with rage and despair, that it sent shockwaves through the very fabric of reality. I knew then, with a sickening certainty, that we were not dealing with something as simple as a restless spirit or a figment of our imagination. No, this was something far more ancient, far more powerful than anything we had ever encountered before. And as I fled from that room, the echo of her scream ringing in my ears, I knew that our lives would never be the same again. For the darkness had found us, and it hungered for our souls. And try as we might to escape its clutches, we knew that its grip on us was inexorable, its influence spreading like a cancer through our once peaceful home. We were trapped, ensnared in a nightmare of our own making, with no hope of escape. And as the whispers grew louder, the nightmares more vivid, we could only watch helplessly as the darkness closed in around us, swallowing us whole in its endless embrace.